Looking for a place to speak your truth? This podcast is on an endless pursuit to build through entrepreneurship, empowerment, and creativity. Through thought-provoking content and a fearlessness to dive into untouched topics, with an undeniable dedication to highlighting others who are often overlooked. This is Deep Conversations.
Stay tuned for Deep Conversation Podcast.
Welcome to Deep Conversations Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Ryan Stewart, and today I am blessed here to have Rich Calton, who is an author, an educator, and a founder. And I also have Reuben Quansah, who is here as well. So, guys, I thank you for joining me on this podcast today to talk about this, the Harlem Live book. But before we start, I just want to start from the beginning with you guys. And if you guys could tell me a little about yourselves for the viewers.
You want to start, Reuben?
I let my elders go first.
Fine. Well, my name is Richard Calton. I'm originally from California. I came to New York in 70. I visited in 77. I moved in 78. I hung out for a while, and then I went to school. Took a majored in journalism and a minor in computer science. And then after that was over, there was a major teacher shortage, and I kind of had soured on journalism by the end of my college. And so I became a teacher. I never had an education class in my life. Yeah. And literally within 9 weeks, I was in front of 29 students in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, with a piece of chalk, half a piece of chalk, and a sponge as an eraser, and they're like, go have a go at it. I'm like, wow. And I right away was like, well, not right away, but I had the kids write letters to the mayor because the school was, you could tell stuff was not right. And so I didn't, I was naive. I didn't know what I was doing. So I just had the kids write the Mayor Koch at the time, and they got to the mayor. And so the mayor comes to the school, and it caused a big hoopla. But because I was just a per diem teacher, they got rid of me. And then I ended up in East Harlem for 8 or 9 years. And then from that, I left and then went to Teachers College and started working with an organization that was putting the internet in the schools a little bit before the Board of Ed was doing that. And so I called my kids, who I had stayed in touch with from my last couple of years of teaching, and we had done a newspaper in the school. And I'm like, there's this new thing called the internet, and we can do the newspaper. This is 1995 or 1996, and so on a worldwide basis. So I just got a computer and a camera, and we started going around, and it built, because we were like one of the first youth media organizations. We had got a lot of publicity, the New York Times, CNN, ABC. So we're kind of riding the crest of a wave, so that kind of helped propel everything forward and gain momentum. And the kids felt like they were pioneers, and they were, And so, and then like Reuben was like the second generation that came through. That was, there was the first batch, and he was like part of the second batch that came through, as the other kids cycled out and went on to college. But Harlem Live was on magazine, and in the beginning, I was more hands-on, but like slowly but surely, as the kids got more skilled and stuff, they became the teachers. I just more and more rescinded into the background. And when you get to chapter 15 in the book, there's a part where the city wants to close them down, and I'm like, it's after other struggles. I'm like, we're not going to win this. And the kids are like, no, we're going to do this. And so that was, it kind of propelled me forward. But that chapter is iconic because it just surely shows how the kids were totally in charge at that point, And Reuben can tell you,
Yeah. Well, just first, thank you for having me. I appreciate giving my 2 cents. Family's from Ghana, born in the Bronx, born and raised. But sometimes I jokingly say I sleep in the Bronx, but I live in Harlem. Because as a teenager, I found myself engaged in so many youth programs that were just at that cusp, that border between the Bronx and Harlem. And Harlem Live was one of those programs. When I was 17, getting ready to finish high school, going to college, I was part of this youth program in Harlem called, now it's called Achieving Leadership's Purpose. At the time, it was called the Archbishop's Leadership Project. And there was a friend of mine or a classmate of mine who went to high school with me, who was part of this program where he was starting a radio show. And same guy, and when we were in high school together, we ran for office at one point together. We had almost all the same classes. And he said, you have a great radio voice. You should, hop on the show with me. It's called Harlem Live Radio. And I said, all right, I'll come along. And I used to see him every Sunday for this youth program. And I told him, I'm going to come. And then finally one day I said, no, let me just come. And so when I get there, it's Harlem Live at one of their locations. As Rich mentioned, I guess second generation, second wave of folks who were involved. This was around 2001, I believe. Yeah. And so when I get to this location, I didn't really know it was Harlem Live yet. All I knew is I stepped into this area. It was like, literally, it was just teenagers working. It looked like, just imagine Ghost Rider, but not just a few kids, but a whole bunch of kids writing, recording video on the translucent apples that existed at the time. There was a lot going on. And one student came to me and just started questioning me and interviewing me and asking, and you just feel like it was like a teenage newsroom. And I was like, wow, what is this? And funny enough, Harlem Live Radio, I think I was involved in that for a short bit of time, but I got so wrapped up in everything else that was going on. Rich at the time was there, you should come back. So during that last semester academic year of mine, I popped in another time during the semester to see what was going on. At that time, I believe they were at their new location in Harlem. And then I came again in the summertime. When I came in the summer, Rich was like, remembered me from popping by and said, hey, you want to be an editor, or you want to participate in our activity we're about to get in? I said, all right, sure. He's all right. We're going to be interviewing folks in like 5 minutes. Just, we're right here. And then 5 minutes later, I'm in my white tee, in the early 2000s, the double XL, triple XL white tees was the big thing. So I'm in my crisp white tee. It's like 89, 90 something degrees outside. I'm in this loft looking space. Whoever pulls up a camera, and another student's asking me questions about why I want to be editor-in-chief. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that, okay, I'm in front of a camera. I have to communicate as well as you can. And I just wanted to make it happen, whatever it was I was doing. And I felt like I was building a plane while flying it in that time span. And before I knew it, I had other folks who were part of a team. I had friends of mine who I invited days later to come participate. And till this day, there's some folks that I met that first week, who are friends of mine to this day, who were at my wedding, who know my kid, my daughter, just from the initiative. Rich, he said that, he kind of fell back. It's true, but he's really good at saying one or two key things to put you in position to leverage whatever it is that you have to offer. And the same way he sort of encouraged that with me, he did that with literally everyone who participated in Harlem Live. And if you were anyone who just stopped by just to learn a little bit of something, or if you heard anything from someone else about Harlem Live and you stopped by, you'd sign in, you'd meet with another person who was a reporter or a video editor or something. And, sort of like it was like something that was magnetic about it that would pull you in. So that was sort of my experience. This is kind of who I am. And, I could say so
Tell
much,
him what
but
you do now. Tell him what you do, or tell Brian what you do now.
oh yeah. So now I work with the City University of New York with an initiative started by the Mayor's Office, CUNY, and the Department of Public Schools called NYC Men Teach. Wow. And so the goal behind this is to recruit more men to become teachers in New York City public schools. I don't remember the exact numbers offhand, but relatively speaking, there are well over 1.2 million students in New York City public schools. In 2015, they did a study. At the time, there were around 70,000 or so teachers. And guess what percentage of those teachers were male teachers? Let's take a wild guess.
I was just thinking that as you were saying it. I'm like, I wonder how many. I know it's those.
Yeah. I mean, well, just to give the numbers, it's less than 10%. At the time, it was 8%. And it's a very, very small number when you think about, the classrooms. The classrooms are typically 50-50 folks who identify as, a male, female. So what does it mean to not have a bit more of a male presence that's representative of the community, the environments that many of the students are coming from? And so, based on the study, they found that there less than, it was about 8% of teachers are male. Many of the teachers don't stay. After the first year, they end up leaving. Many of the teachers who do end up leaving tend to be Black and brown teachers. And so the whole initiative, which is supported now by the city, is to create systems, create a pipeline. I work on the college side, but from high school, college, post-grad, and those first 2 years in the DOE, to support male teachers to stay. And so I've been fortunate enough to work in this program. They're amazing teachers that we meet, and we sort of have conversations that students typically wouldn't have in the classroom setting. And I feel fortunate to do this work. I always tell people, when you see what I'm doing, it's not just me; there's a whole community of people behind me. Mm-hmm. For me, part of that community were spaces where I got to develop my own personal skills, my public speaking, my ability to write, and Harlem Live was one of those spaces. So there's skills that I employed then when I was 17, 18 years old that allows me to engage with folks who want to be teachers now, who may not even see themselves as teachers, but have skills, that programs like NYC Men Teach help unlock. Mm-hmm. And so, it's a great opportunity. I'm glad to be doing that. I'm glad to have had the experience of Harlem Live, and we hope in our own ways to create similar initiatives, programs, and spaces where students get to feel empowered. Yeah.
Now, before we get back to
guys, pardon me. Reuben, do you guys provide a support network ongoing, like while they're in the classroom? I mean.
Yep. So how it works typically is, I work at one of the 2-year colleges. So we, students we work with stay with us, they work with us, we provide resources, we provide programming, and different kinds of professional development. They move on to once they're in the program, they stay until the 4-year. I literally hand them off to a program director at the senior college. When they're done there, they get different kinds of funding to help pay for certification exams. The initial certification, typically kind of like the SATs, there's certain stats that show how Black and brown folks perform when it comes to passing the certification exams. Mm-hmm. So we provide supports to help, like workshops and different things to help make sure that students are able to take it, pay for it, pass it. Once they're done with that and they start in the DOE, that first year, we call it the village. There's sort of a village that they become part of where they have what we call an anchor. And anchors usually help them because, as I mentioned, that first year, a lot of teachers tend to disappear or switch into administrative roles. So anchors are kind of like that first line of defense against them leaving, in terms of just emotional support and professional support. And so it stays, and at some point, those first year, second year, third year teachers become anchors themselves. And so that's essentially the pipeline. Yeah, yeah.
So why do you think so many male teachers leave after a year or a year or two, like you said?
Well, just to tie it back to Harlem Live, I feel like there aren't many easily accessible citywide programs that young guys are aware of where working as an educator can be demystified. Like one of the first experiences that I had in Harlem Live was learning about video editing. And that took me on a journey of learning about video editing well past the years that I was involved in Harlem Live. And it was young guys who were teaching me, me and my friends who were involved. And so demystifying what teaching and what educating looks like, I think that's one of the biggest stereotypes. And just ideas around masculinity and what it means to be a person who educates in a way that's caring, in a way that's nurturing. There right now, for instance, there's a mentorship program that me and my colleagues at the college that I'm working on to recruit men to be mentors to men who are teachers now who are teaching in early childhood education. We're seeking to have them support students who are looking to become early childhood educators, because a lot of guys just don't want to go in that direction because they're afraid of working with young kids. There are a lot of ideas and stereotypes around what it means to be a grown man working with infants and toddlers, kids in kindergarten, first grade. A lot of guys are just either nervous about interacting or scared of interacting, or they feel like it's just not a lucrative field to work in. And so that sort of pushes people away. But when they think about the fact that, wow, like one, there are different opportunities work-wise where you can work with that age group. And two, it's an important and valuable career. Once they get that information and there's spaces where they can learn about it, it makes a world of a difference. And so it's access, misinformation, and a few efforts to demystify what this role is as a professional career that sway people away. A lot of guys are growing up are taught to be doctors, lawyers, engineers, but not necessarily educators. It's seen as typically a non-traditional career for us.
So Rich, when did this vision Harlem Live start for you?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, when did this vision for Harlem Live start for you?
It's funny because the book kind of like the first part of the book talks about how I fell into teaching, and you could see all the pieces coming into place. They literally, you could see how all the dots connected. And the first inkling of it became when in my first year teaching, that was tumultuous, where the school got me out before the end of the year because of the the problems that I caused with the mayor coming and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I would come back in the afternoons and still it was because I was there most of the year to participate in the ceremonies and stuff like that, that they have at the end of the year. And I'm like, you know what, let me go a couple of trips where I take the kids on trips after, outside of the school. We go into the city and go on the Staten Island Ferry or whatever. And it was from those trips at the end of that year, I'm like, where the barriers between, teacher and students and the performance that we were all doing in a classroom, everyone's performing, I'm performing, they're performing. But all those things came down, and you're just interacting as people, right? And from that, and from being in New York City, there's always so much going on. I could pick up, oh, that's kind of like what gets their interest. Oh, that's what gets their interest. So the following year I did a lot of subbing, and then I did and before I found a school, and then I found a school, and I started those trips right away because I'm a white guy in a community of color. And so I know there's going to be trust issues, right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I could break those down, and then maybe by January we can get somewhere. But I'm like, I don't want to wait that long, So I found that these trips, by taking 5 or 6 after school, I would bring them back to their apartment, in the city, get to know the parents before their parent teacher night. It just helped break down those barriers. So it was like, yeah, okay. The perfect example, and I use it, there's one in the book, this kid, Georgie Davis, wouldn't respond to any question in class, wouldn't answer, do his homework, da da da. After one of those trips, turns out he's a math whiz, and he started participating in class, doing his homework. They had the kids have to know that it's a safe space for them to participate, right? So anyway, those trips were the first thing, like taking the kids outside of their neighborhood. And then while I was teaching, we did, like I said, we started a newspaper, and that's right around when the Mac came out. Well, it came out a little bit before that, but it became really easy to create that. And so we started doing a newspaper, and then, so like I said, when I left teaching out of frustration and learned about the internet, kind of like all those pieces came together. My minor was computer science in college. So, technology and teaching and journalism, it's like all the pieces kind of came into place, and I worked with the kids that I had last taught. There's one kid in particular, Angel Cologne. He was very charming. Oh yeah, So he was very charming and charismatic, and so he was able to draw on other people because of his character. And he was the only one of the original kids I started with that stayed long enough until there was enough other kids to carry the momentum going forward, until like the Osakways and the Coles and Curleys, until they came around, and they kind of like picked up the baton, so to speak. But it just skyrocketed again because we were one of the first, and so it snowballed. Angel actually got an award from the King of Sweden. We went to Sweden. We're part of a national competition, and they said, if you win, Rich, you go up and greet the king. I'm like, well, why would I go up? It's like, so I said Angel, and so he was the only young person that got to meet the king. In the Great Hall where they pass out most of the Nobel prizes.
I just that just made me think about the reach of Harlem Live. I mean, it's called Harlem Live, but there are people that were involved from all over the place, and even into deep into my adulthood, I met people who at some point were connected and engaged with Harlem Live, which to this day amazes me. Like first, right after I finished high school and I was in college, my first year in college, I always found space to mention Harlem Live. So I remember mentioning Harlem Live to one upperclassman. I think it was a sister who was a junior, senior. I believe she was a senior, junior going into her senior year. She was an editor for Harlem Live online. Harlem Live used to have online editors who would, if you're writing an article, if you're writing a paper, you send it to one of the online editors, they edit it and send it back. And this, young sister from Philly was one of the online editors at my school in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. I was like, what are the chances of that? Or when I was in college, when I came back from my master's, I was taking courses at City College, and there was a guy I used to study with. This guy was one of the smartest guys that I know, Puerto Rican brother who was like an artist. And anytime we were doing work, I hit him up if I had a question like, hey, did you do XYZ? Did you read XYZ part? He'd call me from or I'd call him, he'd be in Mexico, he'd be in Paris another day. One time he did a painting for the Obama on the Air Force One. I'm like, what? How are you so exposed? Which is dope. But and one of his references for me was, when he was in Harlem Live, he used to always travel and do all these different things. Rich, I don't know if you remember a guy named Nelson Caban.
Oh yeah,
Nelson. Yeah.
Oh my God, Nelson, right? Nelson.
Yeah.
Oh,
wow.
Phenomenal. Are
guy.
you still in touch with him?
Yeah.
Hit me up on the alumni page on Facebook.
Yeah. I'll hit him up, and it's a phenomenal guy. Through him, I got to meet other people, and also after my college years, I was part of this African Rites of Passage, and so one day we're all having dinner, we're all talking, and I remember Harlem Live. One of the dope things about it is that when you would go to the homepage, there would be like a profile of all the people who were involved, right? So like, and you know, once you're part of Harlem Live, someone interviews you, and you sort of get the opportunity to write your own profile. Someone, you know, works a little profile for you, so you get to see who else is involved in Harlem Live and where they're from and what their interests are. It was like Facebook before Facebook, MySpace before MySpace. I don't even know what to call it. And so so I remember seeing a person's face on there. I can't remember her name anymore, but I remember seeing her face on there. And this is years later. This is probably 10, 15 years later. I'm at a dinner in Harlem with folks from this African Rites of Passage, and I see this lady sitting at the table, and I'm like, wow, that face looks so familiar. And she mentions her name. I asked another friend of mine who's part of Harlem Live. We look in the archives and find out that she was part of Harlem Live. And, you know, it's just, I don't know, like it's a really, really small world, you know, that Harlem Live sort of created from people who were engaged wherever they were, who've gone out into the world and, you know, done whatever they've done, picked up whatever skill they've picked up from that space, and put them in environments where, you know, serendipitous connections happen, you know, and I've seen that happen I'm just telling you the stories I remember, but it's happened so many times. And last thing I'll say is, you know, Harlem Live, yes, on one end, it's about the you know, a space where folks had the opportunity to develop, you know, journalistic skills, but it was also a space where people had an opportunity to tap into who they were. You know, it's a space where if you had some sort of skill, you didn't have it. There wasn't an uncle or aunt or a friend or someone there who was saying, "Oh, you can't do that. Oh, you want to do this?" You know, like there was a space where if you had an idea and you wanted to try it, it was an incubator space for you to try it. Right.
And that's what I was getting ready to ask you. I'm gonna ask both of y'all. But what has Harlem Live taught? What has Harlem Live taught you guys about yourself? I'll start with you, Reuben.
Yeah, you know, but before Harlem Live in high school, I did decent in high school. I didn't do too bad. And the way my high school was, if you had some sort of quote unquote promise, you know, there were efforts made to sort of support you. And Harlem Live was one of the first programs that I just happened to join that wasn't part of the engine of trying to support I didn't hear about it from some counselor or, you know, I heard about it from a friend. So being in that space, I was only there because I desired to be there. There are a lot of people who are there for that reason. And Harlem, for me, in that space of my own choosing, it helped me realize that on my own terms, that there are ways that I'm called to be a leader. And I'm trying to think of how to phrase it because I don't want to use it lightly. Like some people look at the idea of being a leader as, you know, kind of like as a badge of honor or like, you know, like something to be given affirmations of, you know, but when I look at leadership, I look at leadership as a responsibility when you're in a position because you have a certain knowledge, you have a certain sense of yourself, you have certain skills that calls you to act because no one else can do that. Like you have to do a certain thing because if you don't, then no one will, right? Harlem Live really isolated that idea in my mind and helped me crystallize it in a way where I realized the importance of taking up a certain role and a sense of responsibility because if you don't, who will? Right. For that particular period of time. So that kind of stayed with me in different points in my life. And it showed me how, okay, sometimes you have to show up in a certain kind of way because that's in the community space you're in. If not you, then who? And so in that sense, it helped me realize what it means for me to show up. Because everyone's a leader in some capacity, you know. It's just a matter of having the spaces and environments to show you. And so yeah, that's the best kind of answer I can give.
When Reuben came back the second time, the first time he just came and was introduction, I think we were in the other space. When he came back, when we were in the loft space, which was everyone's favorite, we were just starting the summer media challenge. What we did is we would take on a lot of the kids from this program that the city has called Summer Youth Employment. And so we'd have like 20 something kids, plus our regular kids who were year round. And then we would break them into teams, and then they would compete to who could produce the most content for the website, the most, and take the most classes and do the best presentations. So, Reuben had that presence the minute he came in. That's why I said, hey, that's why I said you want to be one of the leaders, because he just had that presence. And so you could just tell. But I think that was one of my skills as a teacher was when I was younger. I had a stepmom, and I used to write poetry, and we didn't get along, and I brought a poem to her once, and she looked at it, and she ripped it. She goes, "You didn't write this. You copied it out of a book." And so I stopped writing poetry. And so I think that wound helped me as a teacher. Like, I want to see what the capacity and the interest is of the kids that I teach, and try to like make sure that either give them a kick, or just make sure, or just tell them don't lose that flame. I feel that way, Reuben, about Brian, the young guy that was in Shanetta's son that was at the book signing.
Yep.
I feel
Mm-hmm.
that's by him, so I take him on trips around the city. He's homeschooled, but he's the same way. But that's why his mom does homeschool him, because he has that spark. He's definitely a Harlem Live kind of person, but he has that spark that it's like sometimes the schools can take that out of you,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and
yeah, it's true. It's true. And that said, in the work that I do, and not even just work, but just in my engagement with young folks, like one of the things I loved about Harlem Live was like our man on the streets. Like there was a thing where, like kind of like a reporter, you would walk up to people and you would ask them questions, and get to know them. And at first it's a little nerve-wracking to try to do, but after some time you really get used to it, depending on how often you do it. And I think that's something that stayed with me. But also, being from New York, growing up in the city, knowing how things are, how things can be here, when I see young folks, whether it's in the street or whatever situation, like I like to talk with them, or like not big bro them, you know what I mean? But offer, as much as a caring and nurturing way, offer like, bro, this ain't it. Or like, offer my 2 cents. Because a lot of times, a lot of people are scared of young teenagers. A lot of our elders, a lot of our adults, they're afraid of them and afraid to walk up to them and say 1 or 2 things. And sometimes, when you do that with a kid, that goes a long way in them seeing themselves, when they see themselves reflected in someone who's willing to approach them. I remember years ago, a mentor of mine I had, elder mentor, really, 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 a person who used to push people to be their best selves. I remember one time, he was talking with a collective of us young folks, and he told us, "I love you." Said, "I love you" to all of us. And I remember, whoa, like 1 is a guy, 2, I never how often do you hear a older Black man telling other young Black kids, "I love you"? That's not something that you hear. No. If anything, you hear stigmas behind that, And so, just having the courage and the boldness to talk with young folks and encourage them and tell them like, "Yo, like, I see what you're doing and you're doing it well. Keep going." Being able to step out there, you just have to have a space where that's developed within you. That's the first step. And then the second thing, just to be able to offer some sort of affirmation goes such a long, long way. And I feel like Rich in his own way, that's what he's done in Harlem Live, but that's what he does in general. With the young folks that he comes across. And that's something that I value, and I try to do with young folks around us, because as I was mentioning earlier, the programs that exist in the city, I'm not saying that there aren't programs, but it's harder to find a program to encourage young folks to follow their purpose and do the things that inspire them. It's harder to find those on the bus ads and on the TV screens and on, you're not going to see an ad like that strolling through your your Instagram page because it senses that you need some encouragement.
Yeah.
So for every person who's able to offer that, or any community space that's able to offer that, I feel like it goes a long way. And of course, for me, Harlem Live was one of those things.
So Rich, you said a little earlier that you said you feel like sometimes school can take that spark away from kids. Do you feel like when you started Harlem Live, that was something that you wanted to make sure that you kept in there to just allow the kids to be able to grow and just be them? Because sometimes in school you tend to, it's almost like it's a program. So and inside of schools you're supposed to be this certain way. And listening to Reuben, in Harlem Live, you're able to grow naturally and just kind of almost feel the way he's speaking. It's like he was almost able to grow freely, and you were the person who allowed that. Do you see all of those kids who just, how did that make you feel? When you hear those things.
I feel blessed because
Mhm.
all are in my life, and they propelled me forward. There were so many struggles, and there were times I wanted to give up, but they were, the kids were so great. It's like,
Mhm.
I can't give this up. Look, these kids are doing incredible things. But yeah, you'll hear that a lot in the book with there's a lot of voices from the alums and other adults that were participating. And I think that was one of my skills, is just being able to, get the kids going, but then just step back,
Mhm.
and kind of like get out of their way, So there was one, Reuben knows Danya. She wanted to do an Ivy League college tour. I'm like, go ahead, It's like there was a guy, Kevin Benoit, who started doing poetry slams. Like, it's like whatever they wanted to do, It's like, and
Shem would flash.
Huh? What?
Shem would flash. I remember Shem was like, when Flash was the thing, there was no one better you can go to learn how to do any kind of Flash animation than Shem. It's like he could come up with the ideas off his head. And I used to always wonder, like, how did he learn how to do this stuff? And I think, and sorry to interrupt, Rich, but I would watch him, like, sort of come up with ideas in his mind. Like, before, I remember for the clickable map of Harlem, before Google had that Google Earth thing, like before that even existed, he had his own way of developing like a 3D model of Flash of like an Earth that you could look at while it's rotating. I said, wow. It's like, like he was one of many people who were creating amazing stuff that, where else were you going to learn that?
It's funny you mentioned his name. He just texted me. They just had another boy overnight. So he just.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
Yeah. So him and his wife just had a kid. Yeah, Shem joined us, Ryan, early on. Shem joined us at an age that most of the kids, that was younger than most of the other kids, but he had such a spark. We were like, okay, you can join. He was only 11, but he was with the program a lot. And he was one of the alums that helped fight back City Hall when they tried to close us. And him, this woman, Aisha, she works for the Wall Street Journal now, and Kamal, he's in the military. But those three alums and all the other teens kind of like convinced the city to keep us going.
Yeah. There's so many names. I don't even know where to begin, of people who just had amazing skills that were allowed to flourish in that space. I mean, I'm thinking of Justin. Like he's just a wealth of knowledge overall. Like, whether you wanted to learn something around HTML and how to develop and write code, or if you were trying to work on some technical skill around editing, or if you needed someone just to edit your stuff, like, he had amazing skills. And one of the other people that I competed with during the summer competition, Kim Campbell, who's one of my best friends to this day. As we were competing, we built a camaraderie, and I learned so much about just being a writer from her, because she's an amazing writer. And I believe she went on to be the editor of Harlem Live, if not that, the year after, a year later. Yeah.
How do you?
Yeah, this is a picture of Reuben interviewing Jay-Z, and another student interviewing Obama at the Democratic National Convention.
Yeah,
the
forgot
kids,
about that.
The kids went to the kids went to a book signing, and Donna Brazil was doing a book signing, and she was impressed by the kids, so she got them all to go to she got a bunch of them to go to the Democratic National Convention, where they got to, interview Maxine Waters, Jerry Springer, Cory Booker. So,
Man, so
yes,
so I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to add one last thing. Yeah, that's something I should mention. A great thing about Harlem Live is that the kinds of people you meet sort of humanize stars, for me, like it just humanized meeting people who were, in high positions, because you would just be able to ask questions. Like I remember that interview with Jay-Z. My good brother, one of my close friends, Bernard, he's the one who took that picture. I remember interviewing Jay-Z and just asking him questions, listening to his music and thinking about who this guy was as a kid. Here I am, asking him questions about the community and civic engagement. I've had the chance to talk with Maya Angelou, Wesley Snipes, Ozzie Davis. Didn't talk with him, but met Michael Jackson, Al Sharpton. The list goes on. I mean, so many people. And just quickly, I remember in that particular picture, it was at the Human Bookstore. The Human Bookstore was one of the largest Black bookstores in Harlem. And at the time, it was owned by, I believe, Patrick Ewing's wife in conjunction with two other women. And years later, again, in my post-college years, I actually got to go back to that bookstore, and the folks remembered me from then. It was different management, but they remembered me from then. And I had the opportunity to run book discussions. For almost 3 years, I ran book discussions. I ran some with mentors of mine, people from the community, and it was the same iteration of what was happening with Harlem Live. And I had the opportunity to connect other people who enjoyed reading. So instead of me being the one who was hosting the discussions, I was just hosting the space. So I would have people from the community with books that they enjoyed to read, who would come, and they would host discussions, and they would have conversations, and they would bring different groups of people. We've had authors come with their books, folks who just dropped books, and they would host discussions. And right around the corner from where Harlem Live was, And so for me, it felt like just another iteration of what we were doing there.
So, and Rich, do you feel like this book is going to serve as a vital resource for educators and policyholders?
Well, that's the hope. I mean, one of the things that I left, I finally burned out in 2009. And one of the things that made the program kind of fall apart subsequently is the adults that took charge started doing everything. They started doing the website. They started doing the videos, the kids were just, last bit players, it's like, and so, but anyway, so the death of one of the alums, tragic by a drunk driver, kind of like got me thinking about doing the book. But now that some of the alums have kids that are getting older, I started taking them on trips around the school, around the city. And one of the things that we did right before COVID hit was those kids did a few newsletters in my apartment building in Harlem. So to show that you could do it, something like Harlem Live, because they were younger at the time, with younger kids, at a very local level. So I'm going to try to do that with some of the kids now in their buildings and on their blocks. We also got in touch, Kevin, the editor-in-chief, and us, we got in touch with this program called Press Pass New York City, which is trying to support schools trying to do newspapers. I want you to meet. Oh, they were there at the book signing, Reuben, but I want you maybe
Yeah.
to see if you guys could hook up some kind of collaboration.
Mhm.
But
Yep. Mhm.
there's there's a few things, both to show the power of experiential learning in teaching kids. It's most powerful. And another thing, Reuben, if you look at chapter 3 in the book and have some of your teachers look at it, the second half of that chapter, it shows all the experiential learning kind of things that I did
Yeah.
that engaged, whether it was plays, the newspapers, guest speakers, other trips. Letter writing. Now it would be emails. And there's a website that goes with it that says more in detail how we did each of those things. So that's pretty.
Mhm.
But to show the power of experiential learning, to try to help reinvigorate local journalism in the communities, because a lot of local journalism doesn't exist anymore. They're bought up by hedge funds. It's something I believe that whether it's, even though we're between maybe high schools and colleges, someone's got to step up, got to fill in that void, because otherwise they're not going to be informed. So to show the power of experiential learning, to help reinvigorate journalism. I think journalism, the point wasn't to make journalists, it was to use journalism as a vehicle to teach so many skills. I mean, because
Right.
Reuben talked about the person on the street interviews, and being able to go up to people and ask questions. When kids got over that fear, just like Reuben was saying, if you can do that, you're like halfway to anything. That you
Yeah.
go up and ask questions. So that confidence that you get by doing journalism, the experiential learning, and I guess that's it. To help other. Yeah, and you can use it like a blueprint for trying to create your own kind of like. It doesn't have to be journalism; it could be anything. But some of the challenges and successes that you can have by working with kids and giving them the trust and the empowerment to make things happen. That one of the things I always say. I mean, I don't know if it's a thing, but a lot of the times, like I said, the kids and the alumni help run the program. So there were times I wasn't there and they were running the whole thing. There were times we were going 24/7, and we never had any mishaps. There was no police had to be called. There was no ambulance. No one got hurt. And I maybe that's not spectacular, but going for 14 years and the kids are going on bikes on trips on their own and nothing ever happened. It's like,
Yeah, that's a big deal.
Yeah, that is. And I read that the book found its way to the Smithsonian.
Oh yeah, they were the program. They were the Harlem Life site. I guess the content is part of the National Smithsonian.
Mm-hmm. When you started this vision, I know you couldn't imagine how fast and how big it grew, but when you're able to sit back and just watch, like, how does that feel for you? Because to watch all the kids and all the different alumni who grew and then who actually picked up the torch and ran with it as well and opened up different avenues. Like, how does that feel for you?
Well, it feels great, but it's also frustrating that we're not doing these kind of things with the kids. We're not empowering them to really get engaged, and we're still teaching kids like we were 100 years ago in a lot of cases. So it just like I said, I'm a strong believer. I think that we should do. I'm a big believer. Westmoreland, is that his name? The governor of Maryland. West. Westmore.
Westmore. Yep.
Yeah. They signed into legislation last year. Having service learning so that kids can take gap years between high school and college. To do community service, and I think one of those community services could be, helping provide journalism, but. I feel like they could even start that in like the last year of high school, where kids are actually doing stuff. I think kids should be engaged. I was a fifth grade teacher and the kids were doing the plays and the newspaper. I just don't think that engage the kids fast enough, so that they're excited about learning. I think one of the best quotes that in the book is Reuben saying, we did this and we did this and we did this, and it was fun. Yeah, we worked like hell, but it was fun. So.
Yeah. Was you about to say something, Reuben?
No. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I want to. I don't know. I guess I want to. Listening to you guys, it's fun. It's funny. It like gets me excited too, because like I was telling Rich before you jumped on, Reuben, my podcast is really just I want to uplift and I want to highlight people, for the things that they do, because somewhere along the line that stopped somewhere. You know what I mean? And it's like there's not enough acknowledgments of the things that people are doing, and I think that's why there's a lot of depression. I think that's where there's a lot of all these other things going on, because society doesn't know how to communicate. When you said if you can go up and talk to somebody and get past that fear, that knocks a lot. It gets so much easier, and it's just you realize more things that you could do. When I was in school, I was the quietest person in the world. I didn't want nobody talking to me. You know what I mean? And I didn't get out of that until I was older and to understand some things. And I just found that, reading up on the Harlem Live, that's something that needs to be everywhere. It don't have to be, and it could, start as Harlem Live. It can go to down Florida. Well, it has. You know what I mean? Like you said, it was somebody. Was it Norway? I think you said.
Oh, in Sweden. Yeah.
Sweden. Okay. Yeah.
Ablai, who grew up in this building, I mentored him and his brother. Their family's from Senegal. He was actually just here just before we started, but I didn't do Harlem Live with them. This was after Harlem Live, but I would just take them on trips with some of the other alums. So we would go and help, but I would get them to do that, ask questions. I had a contest with them and who could create the most words, while we were on the subway, and I think it was for some money because we were going to Coney Island. But I gave them the clipboard and the paper, but I didn't give them a pen. They had to ask for a pen. They had to ask for a pen.
Right.
To borrow the pen. So, but it's great because like once they get beyond that fear, I was taking one of the alums, Melvin Johnson has a couple sons, Justice and Harlem. Harlem's a bit shy, and so I just remember being with Harlem and Ablai on we were out in Central Park, and Harlem was like, what are those people do? No, Justice was doing, what are those people doing? Like, go up and ask. I'm like, oh no, I don't want to ask. I'm like, Ablai. And so Ablai just went right up to them and just started a conversation because he had that nudge, it's like, it's okay,
Mm-hmm.
And I just, I think, I'm shy myself. I probably lived through the kids vicariously, because when we'd go to settings, I'd like, you guys go talk to the people. I'd stand in the corner or something like that, But sometimes you can encourage kids to make, encourage kids to do that easier than adults, because they haven't built up a lot of the defenses that, so if they get started at that early enough, they're good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And another thing too that I think is important, particularly as far as the influence of Harlem Live, but the importance of community. I think every young person has to have some sort of rites of passage into creating community. I think everyone plays a role in what it means for them to create their own community. And when you're really young, you don't really, no one really, there isn't a course, there isn't a space where you learn about the importance of being part of a community, but also creating a community. And one of the first things we have to do in creating community is communicate. Like, you have to be able to engage with people. And I think that, just the best way to see how that works is being in community. Like, I love the experimental nature of Harlem Live, because you were there and you sort of went with the flow of the energy of how things, you created community. Like, if you're a student participating, you almost kind of created community by chance. But when you become an adult, and we all have in some capacity to engage this, professional world, this professional life. You have to have a job, you have to have, all these different things you have to do. It's hard to see how you're by chance creating community around you. And I think when you have as a young person, if you have a sense of what it means to engage with and create community, you realize, okay, should I have it by chance or should I have it by choice? What does it mean for me to actually have a sense of agency in creating the spaces that are around me? And I think that's such a core principle that's not really, I don't know where that's part of the conversation. With the young folks in my life, particularly my nephews, I have several young nephews, they're young guys. I helped raise them from the time they were kids. That's really forced me to think about what it means to be actively creating community. And I think the experience that Rich had coming to New York, working with the young folks, and the process of creating Harlem Live was the realization of the importance. And of course, Rich, you could give your take on it, but I feel like that was like the realization of the importance of creating community, creating a space where people can tap into themselves and have systems that help support that. And so, even though Harlem Live doesn't exist today in the form that it did at that time, I think the people who were involved in some way, shape, or form have learned, what it means to create community space. My good friend Mike, who joined Harlem Live with me the time I was there, sports fanatic like me, fellow Knicks fan. I hope he doesn't. If he's watching, I hope he doesn't feel any kind of way about me saying this. But he loves children, like he loves his children, and he loves sports. And so one thing that he offered in the past year was the opportunity to teach kids basketball basics. Mm-hmm. Like just how to get some of the rudimentary, whether it's drills on dribbling, shooting, passing, playing different positions, he's the type of person who is about actions, and having him as a friend while we were doing Harlem Live, his fire to act helped me, because in our community, I had one skill, he had another skill. But as a father, grown man now in his own community, knowing what tools he has access to, this is something he's decided to do. I don't think it's by chance. I think it's by choice, because of the ways he had experiential learning and the opportunity to engage community. And if more kids have the opportunity to be in programs like this, or engage in experiences where they have to show up, not because it's forced, but because it's fun. I think you have things like that happen when those kids become adults.
So Reuben and Rich, I appreciate you guys for jumping on this podcast with me today. I don't know, y'all's conversation just got me excited, talking about Harlem Live, and just all the just the reminiscing for you guys, what it was like for y'all. I think it's always good to just have conversations about these things, and to move the needle along for the future. You know what I mean? And I hope that we can connect and network together, down the line, and that would be awesome. And I thank you guys for jumping on this podcast with me today and sharing your story.
Yeah, there's if I can add, there's Ebony Myers is an alum. She's actually in the schools in Baltimore system, and mm-hmm. she got an education Fulbright, and she went and studied the education system in Finland for a year. Wow. But she's a really cool person to talk to. But she's very involved in the schools in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't the point I was going to make. But everything about the program, though, Harlem Live, was pretty organic. Everything just grew organically. It's like there was really no blueprint. We just kind of like went with the flow.
Just went with it. Yeah, that's usually the best way to go.
Yeah. And also, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's dope that you're doing this, man. This is really, really, really cool. Because I mean,
appreciate that.
no, it is because there's so much. I have to say, I mean, there's so much negative content out there. I mean, it's what I forgot the phrase, but the idea that bad news sells or bad news is good news. Like there's so much. Like I've been talking with my nephews the past week about just we talk about all kinds of stuff, and the topic of conversation for the past 2 weeks has been Diddy, everything, Diddy this, Diddy that, Diddy
draining. That. It's like I don't want to hear about it.
Yeah, it's exactly. And when they were first,
every other
when they were first,
is Diddy right now.
Yeah, it's just and it's like this is crazy.
Yeah, and when they first brought it up, I didn't even know it was a big deal. And then like in the past 2-3 days, that's all I've been seeing. Yeah, and I'm like, oh man, like. What is the counter narrative? Like, where is the space where where we have a conversation about folks who are doing amazing things that are changing people's lives in a way that's like enticing, where folks like, oh, I want to hear more about that. It's really, 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 really hard, to push that, and but it's important, So what you're doing is really, really dope, man.
I appreciate it. Somebody told me. Somebody said when you have a vision, you got to be patient because it's going to take people a while to catch up to your vision. So you got to keep. Yeah. And now, me trying to be in this lane of positivity, all the other 99 lanes are crazy. You know what I mean? And it's like everybody they flood to that, which I mean that's fine. That's not gonna. Happen.
I know
you're right.
I know what I was going to say before is, especially since the pandemic, and it's said in the book that, it's important that we create these spaces where people can come together, again. And another thing that I really believe in is non-institutional spaces, as Reuben can attest from the Harlem Live space that we had, the loft, where there were no fluorescent lightings, we had, a hammock, it was. I guess we kind of like did the Google offices before Google did theirs.
Yeah. It's so funny you say that. I was thinking about that because I've been to Google, and Google operates almost exactly like Harlem Live. It's almost the exact same thing.
Yeah, but so it's the importance of creating spaces for people to be able to come together, and that they don't feel like you're inside of a hospital kind of a thing.
Yeah, this has been my goal the whole time, and it's just, I appreciate y'all for coming on and sharing y'all story, and all I want is for people to come together and have a positive, have positivity, and just be able to walk away from the space and just feel, refreshed from all the craziness, and it's just,
Appreciate it. Keep going.
There are alums all over the world. There's Torrance teaching English in Japan. This girl, Tamara Leacock, she has a clothing line in Australia. Katrina Shakirian, she does politics in Armenia. This woman, Khadija, she does a publication in Ethiopia. She's with her kids. So the alums are all over the world right now, and so it's kind of cool. So you might want to look at that list and get in touch with someone.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say, as I'm hearing it, I'm gonna listen to this video and get them names. I'm gonna look for some of them people.
Yeah.
But again, I appreciate you guys. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah, you too, baby.